Hello you dirty potters, how are you today? In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about throwing taller cylinders. After you've either passed through my beginner playlist or you've passed through your beginner classes, you're gonna start looking at bigger, larger, shapelier forms. And you're gonna start wondering, well, how do I throw bigger cylinders? As you've probably figured out by now, a bigger cylinder leads to bigger forms. Takes a real mastermind to figure that one out. It took me a while, actually, had to stay back a grade. But as you know by now, it's not as easy as it seems to just make a bigger cylinder. The majority of people who even learn to throw past 6 inches will generally reach a plateau, a space in which they can't throw bigger regardless of how much clay they use. And in today's video, I'm going to show you some of the tips and tricks and some of the troubles that my students have come to me with that I've fixed with throwing larger, straighter, taller cylinders. Now, I do want to point out that in this video, I am using 2 pounds of clay and 2 pounds of clay. These are the exact same size. These are the things that we're going to be working with today. Final note, before we start this video, I'm not going to go over coning up and down, nor am I going to go over centering. We are going to talk about pulling a cylinder today. If you want to know how to cone up and down and center properly, 2 things that I think are vital for homogenizing your clay and making sure you have a good workable experience, you should watch these 2 videos. I will link them down below for you. If you don't know how to cone your clay up and down before you throw, it is a vital part of making sure you have nice workable clay. With that being said, let's get to our donut form so we can start throwing our cylinder. From here, I want to point out that in my previous videos, I have advocated for what I call the beehive technique. A lot of people, when they start to cone up and down, they get to this what we call donut form, and then they start pulling from here. I personally don't like pulling from here. Personally, I like to get my sponge and push in my knuckles so that the clay gets a little bit of a rise and also evens out all of this clay that's chunked down here, so I get a much easier pull. On top of that, it goes into the beehive or the triangle form, which makes my pull a bit easier as I'm moving towards this direction. Far too many people have trouble with this flange that pops out whenever they pull a cylinder, and we're going to talk about that later on, but this does help with that flange. So I'm going to do this now, although if you want to see an explanation on that, please watch my beginner pulling video. It'll talk about it more in depth. For now, I'm just going to do it. See, much more even. I got a little bit of height and it looks like a beehive. This will make it all the easier when I start pulling. There are 2 main things I see people do who have trouble with their height when they're pulling cylinders. Firstly, you're not pulling from the bottom. And I know right now you're probably saying, yes, I am pulling from the bottom. But I think once I show you, you'll agree that you're not pulling from the bottom enough. When I say from the bottom, I truly do mean from the bottom. That means your fingernail is scraping on the bottom of whatever you have here. Don't worry, you're not staying there so long that you're burning away your fingers or it hurts, but from here you're going to take this and you're going to push at the bottom-most part of the cylinder, and you should see a chunk of clay form. This is the positive, while this is the negative. This piece of clay is your job to bring up. It should be very clear. The main issue is, from here, you would pull all the way from the bottom. I see far too many people pull from right here, or even right here. These 2 things are not the bottom of your clay, unfortunately. This is a general problem because a lot of people are wasting a good amount of clay. Let's imagine we pull right here. Let's just start. Okay, that's an okay cylinder, but let's pull again. Let's get more height, right? I'm gonna pull again, but of course I'm gonna start here. Again, this is the bottom. This little bit of space I left is not the bottom. So I'm gonna pull from here just to make my point. Man, I pulled my cylinder twice and I'm not getting the height that I want. What's going on? Well, let's cut our cylinder in half and check out what's actively going on. Look at how much clay is left down there in comparison to the rest of the cylinder. This giant chunk here, this amount of clay that I left at the bottom, just because I chose to pull from right here instead of all the way at the bottom, is a massive amount of clay that could have helped towards the efficacy of my cylinder. I could have gotten a taller cylinder, a more stable cylinder. This clay should have been brought up to the greater part of the cylinder. This is what I mean when I tell people to pull from the bottom. Most of the time, I say, you need to be pulling from the bottom. They put their fingers right here and they go, I am pulling from the bottom. And then usually I walk away and let them have their troubles for the rest of their life. When realistically, when I say from the bottom, I mean from the very bottom of the clay. This should be pushed in so that this little bit of chunk clay here that you left ought to be pulled up with you. Of course, I picked recycled porcelain to do this video because it's all I have, so. Yeah, it landed where it's supposed to land. Don't worry about it. Don't fact check where I just threw that clay. It ended up exactly where it was supposed to land. It did not land on the ground. Don't check, trust me. Potter tip. The rule of starting all the way from the bottom of the wheel when pulling also goes towards coning up and down. I see far too many people cone up and down, and they will do this. They'll start from right here. See, there's a space right there that's left over. They'll cone up and down, and they'll do a fine job coning up and down, but as they do so, they're leaving clay at the very bottom, which is starting to manifest this skirt here. This little skirt right here, we do not want. When you cone back down, you haven't brought up all the clay to homogenize it as you are coning up and down. You're just doing this part here, when in reality, your fingers should be at the bottom, bringing this clay up, helping to not only mitigate that skirt, but bringing the rest of your clay up with you. Will you still have a skirt? Absolutely. Will you not have a giant chunk at the bottom of your skirt, messing up your hands and doing all this? Most likely, yeah. Once you bring up this clay that's causing the lump, most likely it'll just come off or it'll be put into the greater part of the clay. Though it may seem childish, one of the things that I always tell my students is to bring the caterpillar up the clay. And this helps them kind of visualize what they're doing to bring the chunk of clay all the way up the cylinder. You see, when we start from the very bottom of the cylinder when we're pulling, we're pushing the clay in from the very bottom, making this kind of weird chunk, just like this. This is what I call the caterpillar. The caterpillar needs to climb up the tree. So you push that in, you start pulling, and you keep going. And you can see that chunk that you got off from the very bottom of the clay slowly climbing the tree just like that. And now the caterpillar is at the top of the tree. Two very big Potter tips. Number one, a lot of people have trouble with a flanging cylinder, and I will often tell them you need to be pulling all the way to the top. And to go with the motif of this video, they often go, I am pulling all the way to the top. When people say they're pulling all the way to the top, what they mean to tell you is that they're doing this. They're pulling. They'll come here and they'll say, I have reached the top. I can stop now. And this ends up having a large chunk at the very top, right here. These are two problems that people seem to run into on an average basis. They say, I'm pulling from the bottom, and then I show them, this is what I mean by the bottom. We pull the caterpillar up to the top, and they go, oh, I haven't been pulling that much at the bottom. And I can tell, because when we split their cylinder in half, there's a giant chunk left at the bottom. Their clay is not even anywhere near even from the top to the bottom, leaving a giant contradiction in between how thin their clay is and how thick it is. Very heavy bottom pieces manifest from this. Secondly, when they're pulling their cylinder up, they'll pull, and I'll say, you should be pulling all the way to the top. Once they get right about here, they give up. When I say pull all the way to the top, I truly do mean go all the way to the top. Finish this, and usually this flange goes in a little bit. It doesn't go away, but it does help. The difference in between ending your pull here and ending your pull here might seem minute, but I promise you, if you finish your pull and go all the way up till your fingers start coming off of the top of the clay, this flange will be a little bit easier to mitigate. I can't promise you it'll go away, especially if you have a super big flange, but if you're trying to pull a straight cylinder, try this out and this will probably help. Now let's pull one more time, but let's give it the old college try. Let's pull all the way from the bottom and put our fingers all the way at the top, finishing our pull. Potter tip. Usually height is the name of the game, so many people will make small cylinders very tall, and everything that was here will come up, giving you more material to go upwards. So if you're looking for a tall cylinder and that's all you want, none of this is speaking to you, you truly just want a tall cylinder, you don't care about the efficacy of your cylinder whatsoever. You could just make a cylinder, watch this video here, which somehow has become a meme. I don't know how this happened, but you know, I'm not gonna deny it. And you could just choke or collar your cylinder. This will get you extra height if that is truly all you're looking for. From here, once you've squished all the material back into a smaller space, you can re-wet your cylinder and pull again. And those tips should get you a relatively taller cylinder than you have been working with. There is one thing I have to say, because it's pretty obvious just from a matter point of view, but I think a lot of people have trouble with this. Once you make a cylinder that is to your liking, let's see how big this is. We didn't give it the full enchilada today, but this is about an 8-inch cylinder. And we only really pulled 2 times, so I'm gonna call this okay. A lot of people want taller cylinders because they want larger pieces. They make a tall cylinder and then they start forming. Well, because of that, you're technically taking this amount of material. You don't have more material than this. This is the set amount you're working with, and you're going to expand it, which in turn takes material from other places in that same space. For example, we have about 8 inches worth of a cylinder here. I'm gonna start forming this cylinder. I've taken all of that material and I've stretched it out. Because I can't create or destroy any more material without adding something myself, look, now I have this piece is about 5.5 inches now. This seems like a really elementary point, but I do want to get the point across that just because you have a tall cylinder does not mean that the size of your piece is going to be the size that you want it to be. It truly is based on your form. If I decided to make a long bottleneck piece, it would elevate the height a little more because I'm taking that material and I'm choking it in to make that amount of space taller. I'm taking all the material and I'm turning it into a form that has height versus something squatty like this. I don't want you thinking that just because you made a tall cylinder, you're automatically going to make a taller piece than normal. The tall cylinder must come with a tall form in order to get a tall piece. Making a squatty form is not a tall piece. Let's cut this one in half just to look at it. Oh yeah, there we go. You can see that skirt that I was talking about earlier at the bottom here doesn't exist. The wall here is relatively even with the rest of the wall here. As for the previous piece, had a large amount of clay all right here in this empty space that you're looking at. This is what I mean by pulling from the bottom. All of this clay went up into the utility of the piece itself instead of being left down there. This piece, after I'm done trimming it, granted, I wouldn't even trim here because this is a relatively even wall all the way up. All of my trimming would be done purely at the foot instead of that skirt that we talked about earlier. And I would have a nice, even, unheavy foot. I wouldn't have to do all that extra work and spend all that extra clay trimming. Pulling from the bottom is something you need to get down. I'm telling you, I've been through so many classes of people being like, I am pulling at the bottom, I am. And then I do it and they're like, okay, so maybe I wasn't pulling at the bottom the whole time. Well, thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today. You know, there are a lot of things that help towards getting height on the wheel. If you truly do just want height on the wheel, you can watch my choking video and that'll just show you how to make height from the same amount of material. And that'll give you height. But the reason I included the fact that that same amount of material is just taking up a lesser amount of space, which gives you that length in the video, is important for the video because technically, in a weird way, you're not really getting height. I care far more about how heavy your bottoms are, and I care far more about you getting the utility and the amount of clay up into the cylinder to make a good, strong, even cylinder with good walls and not get that big skirt that a lot of beginners jumping to intermediate trying to get height have manifesting. In all reality, you could just throw a trash cylinder and like choke it until it gets super high and then be happy with yourself. But you would still have a very heavy bottom and it would take you a lot more work and expert crafters will notice. Thank you again for watching this video. Hopefully you start pulling from the bottom and finishing your pulls. Remember to click all those YouTube buttons on the way out and I will see you, Dirty Potters, next week.
Thank you for your patronage.
I'm telling you, the amount of people who are like, I'm doing the thing you said, and then I do it, and they're like, okay, so you're, so I see now that I was not doing the thing you said, but I was so sure I was doing the thing you said the first time I heard you.